do a very short demonstration debate. Normally debates are a little bit longer than this, but we're going to keep it short today. And so our topic for today is unaccompanied immigrant children not eligible for asylum should be swiftly deported back to their countries of origin. And we are going to have the two sides for this, the agreeing with the topic and also the opposing the topic. And I would like to introduce Anna Tavicollian and Leo Reeves, who are going to be debating for us today. I'll stop my screen share. And I will keep track of time. I'm letting them know that. So I can give you a minute and then 30 seconds, but don't worry too much about going over time. They are both great high school debaters, and I'm very excited to have them here today. All right, I will start time. I think Anna is proposition, so yeah. She will speak first.
Should I go ahead and start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. At this very moment, there are over 40,000 unaccompanied minors being detained in prison-like conditions on our borders, regardless of whether these children are or are not eligible for asylum in the U.S. Judge, during this debate, our opponents are going to suggest that our position is uncaring of children trying to seek entry into the U.S. To the contrary, if we do not act quickly to repatriate unaccompanied alien minors not eligible for legal entry, our country will be subjecting these children to conditions that are often worse than where they come from. My name is Anna Tavicollian, and I'm going to be debating on the proposition side of the resolution. Unaccompanied immigrant children not eligible for asylum should be swiftly deported back to their countries of origin. I'll begin by going over three definitions and then the weighing mechanism and moving on to my three assertions for this debate. First, I would like to define unaccompanied immigrant children as a child who has no lawful immigration status in the United States, has not attained 18 years of age, and has no parent or legal guardian in the United States or closely available to provide care. I would like to define asylum as the protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee or when fearing persecution or for their physical safety. And finally, I would like to define repatriation, according to the U.S. Department of State, as a safe return of a UIC into their country of nationality through agreements with countries. At a minimum, repatriation must provide that children are safely transferred to appropriate government or welfare officials. This cannot occur if these conditions are not met. Judge, we would like you to judge this debate on whichever side their position provides for themselves and for the interest of the United States. I'll now move on to my three assertions. First, current U.S. law requires UICs to stay in prison-like conditions while waiting a formal hearing. Under current U.S. immigration law, the large majority of UIC, in particular children from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, have to wait an average of 587 days for a formal immigration court before they are either sent home or allowed to immigrate. This is according to the Bipartisan Policy Center, July 2019. Although the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is legally responsible to provide safe and suitable placements for UIC while they await their asylum hearing, approximately 41,000 UICs are awaiting a hearing but are being warehoused in prison-like conditions where their health and well-being are not assured. This is according to a 2020 report by the American Civil Liberties Union. When the UICs are waiting for over a year for their hearing in prison-like conditions, this is clearly not best for their welfare. Second, swift deportation will reverse our current humanitarian crisis. The rate of UIC trying to enter the US illegally has more than doubled in 2020 compared to previous years. It is expected that there will be 90,000 UIC attempting to enter the US illegally in 2020 alone, according to the Pew Research Center. The UD Department of Homeland Security estimates that over 75% of these UICs will be caught at the border, placing an impossible burden on our human service capabilities, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center, July 2019. President Obama himself has called the current level of influx a, quote, urgent humanitarian situation, end quote. In an August 2014 interview with PBS, he stated that our laws need immediate amending so that the welfare of UICs can be met, quote, much, much more quickly, end quote. To end this humanitarian crisis, we need to swiftly deport these children for their welfare and for the US interests. Third, our immigration laws protect UIC and US citizens. The burden to maintain UICs indefinitely places a huge burden on our immigration system, our judicial system, our human service system, and on law-abiding US taxpayers. It currently costs the US over $2 billion per year to handle the problem of USCs, according to PBS News 2019. US Border Patrol is responsible for the oversight of these children, but the officials are not trained to meet the developmental or emotional needs of these children. They're also having to care for 6 times more than they have capacity. This is what creates these prison-like conditions, according to Wendy Young of the Kids in Need of Defense, September 2019. Already in the US, we have over 16 million starving and malnourished children who are legal citizens of the US. 22% of all US children live in poverty. The Children's Defense Fund estimates that most UIC will become part of these statistics, and that the US already has serious needs for the $2 billion we are spending on the problems and UICs. For the interests of the US and for the welfare of these UICs, we need to swiftly deport those that cannot obtain asylum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. And now Leo will give his speech.
All right, I will begin time now. Gang violence, murder, sex trafficking, narcotics, starvation, unemployment, and orphan status. These are just a few of the reasons children that are fleeing their homelands for the US. Without the protection of an adult, our opponents want you to believe that the United States, the most powerful and financially prosperous country in the world, should say no and force these children to return to certain hardship and possibly worse. Hello, Judge. My name is Leo Reeves, and I oppose the resolution resolved unaccompanied immigrant children not eligible for asylum should be swiftly deported back to their countries of origin. For the definitions and weighing mechanism, I accept my opponent's definition and their weighing mechanism, and I believe that you will come to see that it is both the welfare of UICs that is at stake, and it is also the moral conscience of the US that is at stake too. My first contention is over 80% of UIC qualify for humanitarian level status. A 2018 report by the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees of the United Nations has verified that more than 80% of the UICs coming from Central America are eligible for humanitarian protection according to international standards. In 2020 alone, 4 other countries in the world allowed in over 6 million refugees combined, despite having national populations that are 1/10 the size of the United States. My opponent wants you to believe that the US should act differently toward the UIC seeking asylum in the US. This is morally very questionable. My second contention is under US immigration law today, UICs are entitled to an immigration court hearing before deportation. Under the 2008 Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008, UICs from Central America must not be repatriated until they receive an asylum hearing, typically within 48 hours. That is the law. Swift deportation will violate any UIC's right to due process under the law. If a UIC has a valid claim for asylum, the child is transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is responsible for the child's safety until proper arrangements can be arranged in the United States. If the UIC's claims are not valid, repatriation can proceed under the law. However, in 2017 and 2018, the Children's Defense Fund reports that 69% of UICs were seen as deserving of asylum within 48 hours. An additional 22% were ruled as deserving of asylum within 72 hours. That represents 91% of all UICs as deserving of asylum. Why then are we trying to rush these children back to conditions that in many instances involves incredible hardship and often death? In addition to US immigration law, the US has entered into numerous international treaties to ensure that protection and safe passage into the US of child refugees. As Americans, we always demand that other countries observe these treaties when US citizens are involved. Under treaties like the UN Convention relating to the status of refugees, the US may not return individuals to a country where he or she faces persecution or harm. The source here is the American Immigration Council, August of 2018. And my third contention is UICs are traumatized when they reach the US and deserve care. According to Megan McKinnon, an immigration scholar at Harvard University, 3 in 4 UICs are psychologically traumatized on their arrival in the United States. To repatriate them, most likely sending them back to dire conditions, will make matters significantly worse. We have a legal and moral obligation here to care for these children, not discard them because they may cost us some money and effort. Currently, 70% of all Americans see the immortality and rapid deportation and are in favor of granting UICs asylum. The source here is Newsweek 2019. And for those reasons, Judge, I urge you to vote with your morals and vote opposition.
All right, thank you so much. All right, now we are going to move on to the responses. So Anna will have 3 minutes to respond to what Leo said, and then Leo will have 3 minutes to respond to Anna's points. All right, take it away, Anna.
I will begin by going over my opponent's points, and then I will move on to weigh this debate. In response to my opponent's first argument that over 80% of UIC qualify humanitarian level status, in a perfect world where the US has infinite resources and has already met the human service needs of its own citizens, we would be able to dispense with all our necessary health services. The reality is different, though. And in a country where so many of our own do not have basic humanitarian needs met, it is immoral to suggest that our UICs should expect the humanitarian services that not even US citizens have full access to, even if they qualify for them. In response to my opponent's second argument that under US immigration law today, UICs are entitled to an immigration court hearing before deportation. As just said, in an equally perfect world, we would have an infinite number of immigration lawyers to process these asylum claims. However, we don't, and the backlog in our immigration court is on average 3 to 5 years. The damage that would be inflicted on children that are made to wait in detention centers for the asylum hearing would be exponentially worse than arranging for humanitarian returns to their countries of origin, which includes care for their needs. If these children are waiting in these prison-like conditions for 3 to 5 years, this is going to be extremely traumatic and worse than if repatriation is arranged with the countries and they're able to have their needs cared for and be safely transferred back. In response to my opponent's third contention, that UICs are traumatized when they reach the US and deserve care. As I just said, when the UICs arrive from their trauma, their trauma and mental health is not aided, but in fact made worse by the terrible conditions that they live in. The prison-like conditions are equally as damaging, and by holding them there, their trauma will only worsen. It is better to move fast, to deem them candidates for asylum, or deport them swiftly, than to hold them in these conditions that will cause increased harm. Now to move on to weigh the debate. My first contention that the current US law requires UICs to stay in prison-like condition while waiting for a formal hearing emphasizes the extremely harsh conditions that the UICs have to live in for over a year when they're waiting to hear if they get asylum. Second, the swift deportation will reverse our current humanitarian crisis that has only been growing in the past years and is creating problems for the welfare of these UICs, but also for the interests of the US in creating this humanitarian crisis. And third, our immigration laws protect UIC and US citizens. With this swift deportation, we'll be doing what is best for the welfare of these UICs and for the interests of the US citizens by being able to provide the $2 billion that is going to the UICs to be able to help already legal US citizens that are facing starvation and poverty. All three of my assertions prove that swiftly deporting UICs that are not eligible for asylum weighs more importantly than having them wait in these prison-like conditions that is not best for the welfare of these UICs and creates a humanitarian crisis and problems that are not in the best interests of the US. Thank you, and I urge a vote for the proposition.
Thank you, Anna. And now Leah will respond to Anna's points and do a similar summary.
Yes, I will start with responding to the proposition's points and then go over a quick summary of my points. And I'll begin time now. In response to my opponent's first contention that the current US law requires UICs to stay in prison-like conditions while waiting a formal hearing, my opponent is arguing that laws are unchanging and that conditions cannot be improved, especially in the face in morally questionable humanitarian conditions. It is in the case, in fact, that immigrants to this country who can show desirable skills like computer programming, medical and scientific knowledge are immediately moved from detention-like conditions into more than adequate temporary housing. It is only because children have inadequate representation that they are not given care on arrival. This is a matter of choice, not law. In response to their second contention that swift deportation will reverse our current humanitarian crisis, at the heart of this debate is what is best for children who are fleeing conditions of violence, poverty, and exploitation. My opponent wants you to believe that in the time it's taken for immigrant children to arrive at our border, their countries of origin are ready to make nice to the contrary. Countries south of the American in particular remain among the most violent places to live on the planet. And their third contention, in response to our immigration laws protect UIC and US citizens, my opponent is arguing that just because there are laws, that those laws work as intended. This country is filled with examples of laws that fail to protect people as intended. Still in the United States, over 25% of all people of color do not have health insurance as mandated by the Affordable Care Act, and 100% of all immigrant children will be in this category despite the law. Caring for UICs is in our budget. With a 1% reallocation of military budget, for example, the UIC's needs would be met. And now briefly to go through my case, My first contention was that over 80% of UIC qualify for humanitarian level status, and my opponent dropped this. They basically conceded that 80% of UIC people qualify for humanitarian level status. They just respond with that even our own citizens don't have all of these rights. This doesn't respond to the fact that we still need to give UICs the chance to receive citizenship into the United States and to seek asylum. Basically, we need to give these people a chance, and this chance is best given when we don't rush a 20%, a minority of people back to their country of origin. And then the other point my opponent brought up was that conditions are worse in holding centers. However, the holding centers are necessary in order to seek asylum. The end goal of seeking asylum is worth the wait in holding centers, whereas what my opponent is bringing up is rushing people back to countries of origin where the conditions are 10 times worse than anything they will ever experience in the States. And for those reasons, with the mind of the UICs and with the best for the UICs in mind, I urge an opposition vote.
Thank you guys both so much. I know I was very impressed, and I imagine that everyone else was very impressed too. I forgot to say this at the beginning, but I want to make it clear that Leo and Anna did not choose their sides either. I assigned them their sides. So this is what side they're debating doesn't necessarily represent their opinion, but just they had to get really into a side no matter what it was. So I think that's just another great example of how impressive debate is. So thank you guys both so much for joining us. We do have a few minutes for question time.
I can say a little something. I think that when you have your outline all prepared and you have this written research and stuff, and since you're assigned a side randomly, you just kind of get into it no matter what, and you just kind of accept that this isn't your opinion and it doesn't have to be, and your opponent knows that. And if you are really passionate about a subject, one side you might argue better if you get that side. But I think generally when you have your research and prepared and everything, you find a way to kind of get into it, even if you don't believe it.
I completely agree. I also find that a lot of times when I am passionate about something, that's when I give my best speeches, because it's the most convincing when it sounds like you really believe what you're saying. So I think that sometimes that passion is what's really important. All right, I see a few other hands, so feel free to just jump out and say something.
Yeah, so I could start with this. I just finished my sophomore year at South, so I've been doing debate for 5 years. This next year will be my 6th, and I just love all the research that goes into it. It keeps me knowledgeable on current topics, and I'm just really passionate about just being knowledgeable. I like being able to write cases, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. Yeah.
I started in middle school in my 6th grade year, and I'm going to be a senior this year. And I actually didn't do debate last year. I've been busy with lots of other things, but I did it my freshman and sophomore years. And if I have time, I might do some this year.
I'll respond too, because I also debate, but I did not debate today. But I also started in middle school. So, and I, similarly to Anna, didn't do as much this past year. I started coaching a little bit more this past year. But so if I count last year, this will be starting my 7th year of debate.
I guess I can say a little bit. I guess I'm maybe not the best at balancing it because I haven't done as much in the past. I run track and cross country, and I'm involved in some other things as well. And so I think in middle school, it was a lot easier to add debate into my time. In high school, there's a lot more prep you need to do, and I didn't really have the time to do that. But there are some debate forms, I'm not sure what the correct term is, that you don't really need to prepare as much in advance. So if you're limited on time, those can be really good because you don't have to do as much research.
Yeah, and Leo, I think I remember that Leo might do one of those forms that you you prep right before your round. So you don't have to do as much outside, I think.
Yeah, my freshman year, I did what's called parliamentary debate. And so you just show up to tournaments and you'll get the topic 15 minutes before your round, and you have 15 minutes to prepare your case, just writing topics or writing points off of the top of your head. And then this past year, I did a type of debate where you prepare your cases for a month in advance. Both are great, both are really fun, but yeah, the first one, if you don't have a ton of free time, it's really nice and you can still be really active in debate with that. I've found that whatever topic is given, I get really passionate about it and learn a lot about it. I would say the one I enjoyed this past year was about the International Monetary Fund. I really enjoy like global economic topics and policy. That's just what I enjoy debating and talking about. So this past year there was a topic about the benefits and harms of the International Monetary Fund, and I'd say that was the one I enjoyed the most. Yeah.
All right, I see that we are out of time, but I would like to thank everyone for all of the great questions. And if you have any more questions that didn't get answered, you can feel free to reach out to any of us. I can always put my email in the chat, and I can share questions with Leo and Anna too. But thank you so much for having so many questions, and thank you, Anna and Leo, for coming. I really appreciated it, and you guys did amazing.